you may be completely comfortable with how the basics of share capital work. But over my years of teaching, I have noticed that this is an area where maybe some students just never really got taught the basics, especially perhaps if they got an exemption from F1, F2, F3, or if they'd studied those subjects a long time ago. The basics can sometimes get lost. So I just wanted to run through a very simple example. I'm not going to apologise for its simplicity, but just to make sure that everybody is comfortable with how the basics of share capital works. So let's think about Bob. And Bob is going to start a company. So Bob starts a company, need to give it a name. Let's not try and be too clever. Let's call it ABC Limited. Limited, so that must mean it's a private company. Bob has got £500 to invest in this company. Now, as I know that you're comfortable with, the company will issue shares when Bob invests this capital into the company. But the company's got to make some decision. So the company must decide a couple of things. Firstly, the company must decide the nominal value of the shares. So what on earth does this mean? Well, if Bob's got £500 to invest, each share that he gets from the company must be given a token value. Now, the company could decide any nominal value of the shares. It could decide to say shares are worth £1. Therefore, it would give Bob 500 shares for his £500 investment. Remember, this is the start of the company. Or he could say that the shares are worth £2, and in which case Bob would receive 250 £2 shares, which would cover his £500 initial investment. Or it could say that the shares are worth 10p each, and if they were worth 10p each, then Bob would receive 5,000 shares, which means 5,000 times 10p is £500, and that would reflect his initial investment. All of these would allow the company to issue shares up to a nominal value of £500, which covers Bob's initial investment. Remember, I'm keeping this as simple as I can. So how does a company choose which nominal value to use? Well, it's just up to the company. If I was setting mine up, I'd probably start with £1. Why? Because it's pretty simple to do the maths. And anything that keeps maths simple to me is very useful. But it is up to individual companies to choose their nominal values. Okay, what else must a company decide? Well, I'm not going to write this down, but you will see it in your notes. Before 2006, before the Companies Act was updated, companies decide their authorised share capital, and that was the maximum number of shares that the company could issue. That's actually gone now. It's not in the Companies Act. I sometimes wonder why this is still in the notes, because it's such a legacy clause and term. But now companies do not have to state the maximum number of shares that they can issue. Pre-2006 they did. It was called authorised share capital. Post-2006 they don't. And actually, even though you stated an authorised share capital, you could increase or decrease that amount by passing the relevant resolution. So, the only other thing it must do is to issue. So it's got to decide to issue the shares to Bob, and we're going to issue 500 £1 nominal value shares to Bob. Okay, so Bob's now running the business, and over time the business proves to be quite successful. So sometime later, I don't know, let's say 5 years later, Erica arrives on the scene and wants to invest in ABC. over those 5 years, ABC has generated profits and it's grown, but it's still owned and run by Bob. So, how could Erica invest in ABC? Well, I think there's probably 2 ways. The first way is to simply buy shares directly from Bob. And when Erica spoke to Bob, Bob was happy to sell a few of his shares in the company, but over the 3 years, the company had been successful, made profits, and therefore Bob has said that he would be willing to sell his shares, or some of his shares, at say £3.50 each. Now, if Erica bought shares from Bob, this would be a private transaction between 2 individuals. The company, ABC Limited, wouldn't receive anything. The other way Erica could invest in ABC Limited would be to buy shares direct from ABC Limited. Now, over the course of the next couple of sessions, you will learn about the rules regarding the issuing of shares from companies, okay? But again, just for today, we're keeping it simple. So, ABC might decide that it wants to issue new shares and therefore will issue them not at the nominal value, which was £1, not maybe what Bob wanted, £3.50, but to encourage Erica to buy from the company may say that it will sell some shares to Erica for £3 each. Okay, so in this case, Bob is not involved in the transaction, and the company does get money from Erica. So let's take this a little bit further. Let's assume that ABC issues 200 new shares, and that's to Erica, and that's at £3 each. But you know that the nominal value of these shares is only £1. So 200 shares are issued with a nominal value of £1. So what about the remaining £2? Well, we simply call this the premium on the share issue. Hopefully that makes sense. And let's just look at it in a little more detail. So 200 shares are issued at £3 each, which totals £600 to the company. Of that, 200 represents the nominal value. Sometimes that's called the ordinary share capital, and 400 represents the share premium. I know I'm keeping this simple. I know the issuing of shares can get more complicated with preemption rights, but that is the absolute basics. Let me just do a summary with what we've got now and to highlight something which is quite important. So what have we got? We've got some share capital. We've got some share premium. This is from the perspective of the company. But let's think about this as well from the perspective of Bob and Erica. Initially, Bob, if we just think about the shares themselves, had 500 £1 nominal value shares. So that totaled £500. Let's keep this in pounds. So Bob owned 100% of the company. Erica didn't own anything. But following Erica's purchase of shares and the issuing of shares to Erica from ABC, Erica, as we can see up here, had bought 200 shares at a nominal value of £200 and also paid an additional premium of 400. So if we think about the totals now, just adding across, we've got Bob who invested 500, Erica who invested 600, the company has received £1,100. This has been made up of 700 share capital and £400 share premium. And you'll learn what can be done with the share premium a little bit later. One thing to highlight is that after Erica receives her shares, Bob no longer owns 100% of the company. If you do the maths, it turns out that now Bob owns around 71% and Erica owns about 29% of the company. So Bob's holding and power over the company has decreased. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see later that the issuing of shares has many rules around it to protect members. Well, I hope that hasn't been too basic for you, but as I said at the start, I just worry that sometimes people haven't thought about the basics of share capital for quite a long time, and therefore I hope this video has just clarified any concerns.